Hello, everybody. Today I want to talk about a catalogue of measurements against the far right. At least this is how Angela Merkel introduced it this week. She has assembled a committee only this March that has provided the inspiration for what I will read out to you. You can imagine that there is a lot to comment on every single sentence of it, but I hope to run through with as little as possible because there are 89 items, and the money that's shelled out is in the range of 1 billion and 150 million euro. So that's quite a bit. And this is worthwhile doing because, unlike in America or Great Britain, the head of government in Germany has almost monarchical powers. This is the thing Germans do not admit publicly. We are supposed, and we are told constantly by our elites, that the head of government has weaker powers than other Western nations. But this is not true. We do not have separation of power like the United States, even though we pay lip service to it. In reality, we do not have that. The Chancellor drafts a lot of laws, and the Parliament is dependent. The parliamentarians are dependent on the Chancellor, and as such, the laws that are once drafted in the executive branch usually make it through the legislative branch. And this is also very different from the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, for example, that does not have a separation of power between the legislative branch and the prime ministership, but is a member of the parliament, and as such is a representative of the parliament, and that's the construction of it. A prime minister is a representative of the body of the parliament that in the UK is responsible for both the legislature and the executive branch. So there is no separation of power. They don't pay lip service to it because there is no such thing in Great Britain, right? But what else does keep the prime minister in check, and which is missing in the German constitution, that is that the prime minister cannot rely on any majority in the House. He has always to convince his fellow members of every individual policy. And this is different from Germany, where the laws, as I said, and also the spending decisions, they all come from the Chancellor's office or from his ministers elected by the Chancellor effectively. And as such, whatever the Chancellor says, like this document, will become spending and law. Okay, now I'll run you through the list of items of the catalogue, the first part of which is supposed to be conducted by the Federal Ministry of the Interior, which is also responsible for the building development. However, the first item cannot be done by a single ministry, and it is very far-reaching because it says there should be an adoption of constitutional law for the introduction of a legal foundation to survey telecommunication. Yes, I'm not kidding. She wants to change the communication so that we can be spied on when we transmit our messages and when we speak over the phone, when we communicate with one another. This is going to be spied on. The second one is supposed to deal with anti-Gypsy sentiments, anti-Roma sentiments, and it says the creation of a national contact entity in the framework of the EU Roma Strategy 2030, which I have not read so far. The second item of number 2 is the independent monitoring and an information center for racist, particularly anti-Roma attacks. And the third bullet point is the evaluation of political measurements and strategies for the combating of anti-Roma sentiments in cooperation with the civil society. The third item is the creation of the Federal Institute for Securing Quality to establish permanent structures and processes of securing quality and enhancing the effects of the prevention and political education in brackets in cooperation with the Federal Ministry of Family, Seniors, Women and the Youth. Number 4, the creation of a new prevention program, Democracy on the Web, which to me just comes to show that the word democracy is not understood in Germany. Number 5 is the raise of funding for a community-oriented project advancement for the federal program societal cohesion, local connected, and again another word for connected, that's the title, for the strengthening of mutual acceptance between immigrants and the receiving society. Number 6 is the raise of funds for the model project Together in the Borough, advancement of measurements in the framework of a resource-independent strategy, social city, strengthening boroughs, strengthening neighborhoods, together in the borough, with a focus on intercultural dialogue, the participation and the networking to strengthen and to limit racism and right-wing populism. So I assume, because they have now thrown in the word populism, that I knew it before, but this is the confirmation that they mean more than just neo-Nazis or people who are like them. They actually mean people like Maggie Thatcher. They mean people like Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin or Bibi. They mean people like Donald Trump. They call a host of people populist and fascists and so forth. And those are the people they target. They are not so much concerned with those few neo-Nazis that are drunk by lunchtime. They are concerned with people like Maggie Thatcher. Number 7 is the expansion of intercultural and diversity-oriented opening of the public sector. The diversity strategy in brackets, and there are 3 bullet points. The assessment of the selection process for the public sector. Second bullet point is the targeted campaign for the recruiting of more people with a migration background for the public services. The third bullet point is a regular assessment or report or poll, I guess, I don't know, for diversity and diversity measurements in the public services. And in practice it says this is to be done in cooperation with the Commissioner of the Federal Government for Migration, refugees and integration. So there is another sinecure office, somebody who has barely anything to do, was completely useless, and he is to think about how we can get more people who are not native Germans into our administration and our police and into our military. Number 8 is the expansion of the federal program cohesion through participation, which I don't know. So continue with number 9, which says the extracurricular political education in context of schools, the expansion of successful model projects, development of compound projects, anti-racist education module. That's the title, anti-racist education module. And that is a compound project. I barely understand the words, and I think they actually don't have a real meaning. So there are some extracurricular classes, I guess, that are supposed to come up soon. Number 10 is a report by the Independent Experts Board, Islamophobia. I have made an entire video about that particular committee or board or whatever you want to call that group of people, and I will link it up in the description box. So this they want a report from these people for with specific proposals to fight anti-Muslim hate and Islamophobic discrimination. Number 11, the creation of a report to assess the right-wing extremism in security departments like the police, for example, or also the military. I also assume that's Secret Services. And they write an expansion of that report for the entire public sector. Number 12. The advancement of political and societal engagement of people with a migration background. By the way, I also have a migration background, but they don't mean me because I was born here. Number 13, a research project, the investigation of a police day. I'm not kidding. So they want some Antifa types or some activist types. Let's put it more neutrally. They want them to patrol along policemen and then to watch them if they talked more to black people than to white people and that kind of things. Meanwhile, we have clans from Turkey and so on that are related, like all mafia clans. And quite naturally, if a suspect is from one ethnicity, can also be whites from the Balkans, for example, you quite naturally are looking for people from the same ethnicity. So racial profiling is a thing that makes perfect sense in a lot of contexts. Anyway, number 14 is additional funds for the area Islamophobia. They have used two words for Islamophobia: hatred towards Muslims. So I assume that's a separate thing. Anyway, and number 15 is a research study about everyday racism, the development and spread of discriminatory behaviors in civil society, economy and businesses, as well as the public institutions. The creation of a societal council for the advancement of a defensive democracy and against right-wing extremism and racism under the leadership of the Federal Ministry of the Interior and co-chaired by the Ministry for Family Affairs, with representatives of the related groups, the civil society, the social partners, and science. Unfortunately, there's a lot to unpack, but I just wanted to say that the word defensive democracy is again at the core of what's going wrong here. Germans would not know that democracy is actually the system that defends society against tyranny. So all these different principles, they're actually designed to limit the power of anybody who comes into any high position, whatever position that is. And it allows the people to give itself its rules because they are guarded against such a tyranny. Those principles, this set of principles is indeed the democracy already. So there is no such a thing as an additional defense of democracy. Democracy is the defense against tyranny. And what they usually mean when they say defensive democracy is we just weaken some of these principles so that people wouldn't even remember them when a strongman came into power, and that would help us somehow to defend democracy. Number 16, the institutionalization and strengthening of the information exchange and cooperation between civil society and security in the security apparatus. That has 4 bullet points. The first being the creation of trust-building exchange formats between the security apparatus and the prevention against right-wing extremism organizations, or the civil societal actors in that field on both the federal and the state level. And in particular, there should be an annual convention in the Federal Ministry of the Interior about the current questions of cooperation. The second bullet point is the further development of official milieu exit programs on the federal level and their cooperation with such programs on the state level. The third point is the creation of a consultation structure, a national consultation structure for the consultation of the environment of potentially radicalized people. That's a lot of that's close to bullying, and that is supposed to be analogous to the consultancy center radicalization of the Federal Ministry of Migration under the roof of the Federal Ministry of the Interior. And number 4 is the research initiative to strengthen the cooperation between police and civil society for the prevention and prosecution of criminal offenses. I find this quite disturbing because it really should be the police that initiates investigations, and they should not be targeted. I mean, they should not target their activity to people that are politically differently opinionated from the elites. This is the fine line between rule of law and arbitrary law. If you can in an investigation is already a kind of punishment, and you can actually punish any opposition by investigating them for minor crimes all the time, while you let everybody get away with everything else around these people. This is harassment. This can be harassment. And even though you don't like the people they claim to focus on, like the neo-Nazis, that doesn't mean that this tool, once it's there, would not be used against other people. So number 17 is intensifying the federal the federal government state level cooperation through the expansion of the community Extremism and Terrorism Defense Center right here meaning the political right in the title, in the framework of the law AG, that's a work group anti-Semitism, and the work group DRAD, which probably stands for the work group de-radicalization. So there should be a cooperation between the federal government and the states, which I think is problematic in itself because it's subverting federalism. And if you know anything about the Machtergreifung, how Hitler took power in Germany, you know that the abolition of federalism is the very first step. And number 18 is intensifying the federal government state cooperation through the creation of a shared platform to exchange experiences, instructions, and current legal judgments of the courts in relation to disciplinary cases against extremists currents in the public sector. Number 19, a new office of political education for professional citizens. Number 20, new additional measurements in the framework of political education to specify phenomena like anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Gypsy sentiments, and anti-Black racism. Number 21, a program anti-racist education work, a strengthened engagement against racism and other forms of group-oriented hostility towards human beings. Holy moly. 22, the strengthening of migration organizations through model projects, through qualification, a compound academy for migrant organizations, houses of resources. So here we see the blurring of lines between the government, the state, and the private sphere, the citizenry, private institutions. This is a thing. This is a continuation of a larger development of the past years. A democracy is all about setting limits to the government so it does not grow into a tyranny, and this is being undermined in the past years. Number 23, strengthening of political education. Bullet point 1, the expansion of formats in the digital sphere. I assume they mean more YouTube channels, more websites. Bullet point 2 is the development and expansion of innovative formats and measurements in the political education of adults, and with a focus of the professionally active. So this is the group they hate most, the people who are actually productive. Bullet point 3 is strengthening the organizations of political education and their intercultural opening. I think there should not be any organizations for political education at all, because basically a state is supposed to be neutral. That's the whole point of democracy, that you don't privilege one worldview over the other, and that you rather insist on principles, so that whoever comes to power with whatever mindset may still take the principles of democracy seriously, so that eventually somebody else may come in later. That's the whole point. If the government itself uses its finances to fund this or that worldview and to fight a different one, then in itself this is a danger to democracy. And it says the expansion of the cooperation of the security organizations with regards to right-wing extremism, racism, and anti-Semitism also. But that's a repetition, I assume. Number 24 is the strengthening of integration initiatives with relation to sports. A model project in the area of sport and integration, among others, the qualification and networking of access centers for the discrimination and for those who have become victim of right-wing extremism in sports, improvement of the cooperation of organized sports and the civil society, with a focus of the cooperation with, among others, the DOSB, the DFB, which is the German football club, and the migration organizations. I don't know what the DOSB is, but I don't really care to find out. So you see the totalitarian nature of all of this. If not even something like running can be unpolitical. No, everything. It must permeate everything in your life. 25 is the strengthening of sensibilization for racism, anti-Semitism, and other forms of discrimination in the education in the public sector. And 26 is an offering for education for policemen about anti-Semitism, and that should take place in the House at the Wannsee conference. The Wannsee conference was the place where the Nazis decided that they would kill all the Jews. I have absolutely no idea why they have to send policemen to that very location to educate them about Nazism. It's so insulting at this point. Okay, I will make a cut here because the video is getting really long. Those have been the items for the Ministry of the Interior, but there are also a lot of other people who will be involved in all of this, and I will read through the entire document because it's very transformative of our society, and it will, I think, destroy a good deal of our democracy. So here we go. I will upload 3 more videos on this in no time, very soon. So I'll see you. Bye.